I tried to warn them that I was okay, but no one could hear me. Suddenly, I realized I was standing next to the stretcher, watching my own body. I saw a point of light that kept growing, and it was indescribable. It was a light filled with unconditional love. For the first time in my life, I felt truly loved and at peace. The story you're about to hear is a true account. The names of the characters and places have been changed to protect the privacy of its authors. If you believe in miracles or have experienced one, leave your opinion in the comments and subscribe. I never thought that day would change my life forever. I had spent a decade postponing that damn knee surgery, convincing myself it wasn't the right time. There was always an excuse. My modeling career, fear of scars, recovery. But at 30 years old, I couldn't keep running away. I vividly remember the morning of the operation. I woke up early, with a mixture of nervousness and determination. My 6-year-old daughter hugged me before I left. "Mommy, are you going to be okay?" she asked, her big eyes full of concern. "Of course, sweetheart. It's just a small repair. I'll be back before you know it," I replied, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Upon arriving at the hospital, the bustle of nurses and doctors surrounded me. They changed me into a hospital gown and took me to a waiting room. There, sitting on the stretcher, the minutes felt eternal. Suddenly, a shiver ran through my body. It was as if an inner voice was screaming that something wasn't right. "Calm down, Diane," I told myself. "It's just fear talking. You've waited 10 years for this. Everything will be fine." A nurse approached, noticing my discomfort. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Sherman?" she asked kindly. "Yes, just a bit nervous," I replied, forcing a smile. "That's normal," she assured me. "Would you like a blanket? Sometimes it helps calm you down." I nodded gratefully. When she placed the blanket over me, I felt a strange relief. However, that feeling that something wasn't right persisted in the back of my mind. Finally, the moment arrived. They took me to the operating room, the bright lights blinding me for a moment. The medical team moved around me, preparing everything. The anesthesiologist approached with a reassuring smile. "All right, Diane, we're going to begin. Count backward from 10, okay?" I nodded, closing my eyes. 10, 9, 8. And then something strange happened. Before they could even administer the anesthesia, I felt as if I was sinking into a deep well. Darkness enveloped me, but it wasn't the induced sleep I was expecting. It was something else, something I couldn't explain. I heard distant voices, alarmed. "What's happening? We haven't even started. Her vital signs are dropping. Quick, we need..." The voices faded, and I found myself floating in a void. I didn't feel fear, but rather a strange sensation of peace. Was this normal? Was I dreaming? Suddenly, I saw myself from above, lying on the operating table. The medical team moved frantically around me. How was this possible? I tried to speak to tell them I was fine, that I was right there, but no sound came from me. It was at that moment when reality hit me. I wasn't asleep. I wasn't under the effects of anesthesia. I was experiencing something that defied all logic and reason. "She's in cardiac arrest," shouted one of the doctors. "Start resuscitation procedures now." I watched as they worked desperately on my body. I wanted to shout at them that I was fine, that somehow I was outside my body, watching everything, but I couldn't do anything but watch. At that instant, I felt a pull. Something was pulling me away from the operating room. I fought against that invisible force. I didn't want to leave my body. I didn't want to leave my daughter. But it was useless. The last thing I saw before being dragged into darkness was my own face, pale and lifeless on the operating table. And at that moment, I knew my life would never be the same again. That surgery I had postponed for so long wasn't just going to repair my knee. Without knowing it, I had embarked on a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about life and death. A journey that would take me to the limits of existence and back. And it all began with a simple knee surgery on an apparently normal morning. The darkness enveloped me for what seemed like an eternity. I had no notion of time or space. Suddenly, as if someone had turned on a light, I found myself in the recovery room. At least that's what I thought. The sounds came first. The constant beeping of machines, the murmur of urgent voices, the rustling of fabrics. Gradually, my vision cleared. I felt disoriented. as if I were floating in a cloud of confusion. Diane! Diane! Wake up, Diane! The voices sounded close, yet distant. My mind struggled to comprehend what was happening. Why are they shouting my name? I'm awake, I'm here, I thought. I tried to move my lips to tell them I was fine, but no sound came from my mouth. Panic began to grow inside me. Why couldn't I speak? Why couldn't they hear me? It was then that a terrifying thought crossed my mind. Oh my God, they've made a mistake. They've operated on someone else. Desperate, I tried to lift my hand, to make any sign for them to notice my presence. Wait, it's me. I'm here. I'm fine. I screamed in my mind, but it was as if I were invisible to them. Frustration grew inside me. How was it possible they couldn't see me? I was right there, conscious, trying to communicate. I watched the medical team move frantically around the bed, their faces tense and worried. Suddenly, something strange happened. My perspective changed. I was no longer lying in bed. Somehow, I found myself standing at the foot of it. Confused, I looked down and saw something that defied all logic. My own body lying in the bed, motionless, while doctors worked desperately on it. The shock was immediate. How could I be seeing my own body from outside? It was like a scene from a surrealist movie, but this was real, too real. No, this can't be happening, I murmured to myself, though no sound came from my lips. I watched with a mixture of fascination and horror as the doctors fought to revive me. Their voices, previously confused, now sounded clear and sharp. No response. Charge to 300, one of them shouted. I saw them apply the paddles to my chest. My body shook violently, but there was no response. Again. Come on, Diane, fight, exclaimed a nurse. I wanted to tell them I was there, that somehow I was outside my body, but conscious. I wanted to assure them I was fine, that I felt no pain, but it was as if an invisible barrier separated me from them. As I watched the scene, a strange calm came over me. I no longer felt fear or anxiety. It was as if I were watching a movie of my own life, but without being emotionally connected to it. It's fascinating, I thought. I can see every detail, every expression on their faces. I can hear every word, every whisper of concern. It was at that moment when I noticed something else. I felt no connection to the body lying in the bed. I knew it was me. I recognized my face, my hair, but it was like looking at a stranger. That body, which had been my home for 30 years, now seemed like an empty vessel. Is this what dying feels like? I wondered. The idea, surprisingly, didn't frighten me. Instead, I felt a deep curiosity, a desire to understand what was happening. Suddenly, I felt a pull. It was as if an invisible force was pulling me upward. My perspective changed again. Now I found myself floating near the ceiling of the room, looking down at the entire scene. From there, I could see everything with amazing clarity. The doctors and nurses moving like in a synchronized dance, the machines blinking, my motionless body at the center of it all. This can't be real, I thought. But it was. Somehow, I knew this was more real than anything I had experienced before. While floating there, between two worlds, I felt a peace I had never known before. There was no fear, no pain, just a sensation of being completely present yet disconnected from everything. I watched as the doctors continued their efforts. Their voices reached me like distant echoes. Come on, one more time. We can't lose her. I wanted to tell them I was fine, not to worry, that somehow I was more alive than ever. But before I could even try, I felt another pull. This time it was stronger. It was as if someone had cast a hook and was dragging me backward. The recovery room began to fade. The sounds dimmed. The last thing I saw before everything turned dark was my own face, pale and serene, in the hospital bed. And then, I was dragged into darkness, into the unknown. I didn't know what awaited me, but one thing was certain. My life, my understanding of reality, would never be the same again. I was about to embark on a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about life, death, and what lies beyond. Darkness enveloped me completely. It was an absolute void, without form or sound. For a moment, I felt panic. Since childhood, darkness had been my greatest fear. Memories of anguished nights in my childhood, hidden under the sheets, fearful of imaginary monsters lurking in the shadows, flooded my mind. No, this can't be happening, I thought, fighting against the fear that threatened to consume me. I tried to move, to scream, to do something, anything to escape this crushing blackness. But it was as if my body no longer existed. I couldn't feel my arms, my legs, not even my own breathing. Calm down, Diane, I told myself, trying to calm the whirlwind of thoughts spinning in my mind. Breathe. Oh, wait, am I even breathing? That's when I saw it, a tiny point of light in the distance. It was so small that at first I thought I was imagining it. But there it was, glowing faintly in the vastness of darkness. If only I could get closer to that light, I thought. If I could reach it, I would be safe. As if responding to my desire, the point of light began to grow. Slowly at first, then faster. It expanded, coming closer to me, or perhaps I was moving closer to it. In this place without time or space, it was impossible to know. As the light approached, I felt the fear vanishing. In its place, a sensation of warmth and peace began to envelop me. It was as if the light had its own presence, its own consciousness. "It's beautiful," I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I had actually spoken or just thought it. The light continued growing until it occupied my entire field of vision. It was no longer just a point in the distance, but a vast ocean of luminosity that surrounded me completely. And the most amazing thing was the color. It wasn't an ordinary white. It was a white that contained all the colors of the rainbow and more. It shone, pulsed, lived. What is this? I wondered, amazed. I had no words to describe it. It was as if I were seeing the color of love, of peace, of joy, all fused into a single luminous entity. And then I felt it. A love so deep, so pure, so unconditional that it took my breath away, if I was still breathing. It was a love that encompassed everything, that forgave everything. A love that knew every part of me, every mistake, every triumph, every thought, and loved me anyway. Tears, could I cry in this state, ran down my cheeks as I immersed myself in this sensation. All my life I had searched for this kind of love, this total acceptance. In my relationships, in my career, in my achievements. And here it was, enveloping me, filling every part of my being. So this is what it feels like to be truly loved, I thought, overwhelmed by emotion. I felt like a little girl again, but this time there was no fear, no insecurity. Just a sensation of being home, of being exactly where I needed to be. As I moved through this light, or perhaps the light moved through me, I began to notice shapes in the distance. They were silhouettes, figures that seemed to be standing in two parallel rows. As I got closer, I could distinguish them better. They looked like monks with brown robes and hoods that concealed their faces. I floated between them, feeling a mixture of curiosity and reverence. Although I couldn't see their faces, I could feel their presence. Each of them radiated the same unconditional love that had enveloped me before. It was as if they were manifestations of that light, each one a beacon of love and acceptance. The most surprising thing was that, despite appearing as male figures, I didn't feel the fear or discomfort I normally associated with male presences due to my complicated relationship with my father. Instead, I felt a deep sense of healing, as if their presence was healing old wounds I didn't even know I still had. As I passed between them, I felt their blessings, their love, their support. It was as if they were welcoming me home after a long journey. Upon reaching the end of this row of hooded figures, one of them stepped forward. It had no visible face under the hood, but instead I saw something amazing. It was as if its face was pure energy in motion, with small sparks of light and color dancing in a hypnotic pattern. This figure addressed me, but not with words. It was more like its thoughts, its feelings, were transmitted directly to my consciousness. "You cannot stay," said the voice in my mind. "It's not your time." I felt a wave of desperation. How could they ask me to leave? I had finally found the home I had always yearned for, the love I had always searched for. "No," I pleaded. "Please don't send me back. I've finally felt what it's like to be truly loved. You can't take me away from this. I've come home." The figure slightly tilted its head, and I felt a wave of compassion and understanding emanating from it. but its message didn't change. "You have a daughter," the voice resonated in my mind. And with those simple words, everything changed. The image of my little one, her face, her smile, her hug before I left for the hospital, all flooded my consciousness. I felt a tug at my heart, a calling I couldn't ignore. Before I could respond, before I could even fully process what was happening, I felt myself being pulled back. The light, the monks, the hooded figure, all began to fade. "Wait," I shouted in my mind. "I still have so many questions." But it was too late. In an instant, everything disappeared, and I found myself back in darkness. But this time, the darkness didn't last. I felt a tug, a sensation of falling, and suddenly, I was back in my body. The return to my body felt like an electric shock. Suddenly, all my senses came alive at once. The antiseptic smell of the hospital, the sound of beeping machines, the rough feel of sheets against my skin. It was all overwhelming. I slowly opened my eyes, blinking at the fluorescent light on the ceiling. The voices around me sounded distant, as if I were hearing them underwater. "She's waking up," I heard someone exclaim. "Call the doctor." I wanted to speak, to tell them that I had experienced something incredible, something that defied all logic. But my throat was dry, and the words wouldn't come out. A nurse leaned over me, her face a mixture of relief and concern. "Welcome back, Diane. You gave us quite a scare." I tried to smile, but my face felt numb. How long had I been unconscious? Minutes? Hours? For me, it had been an eternity. The following days were a whirlwind of medical exams, visits from family and friends, and countless unanswered questions. I didn't tell them about my experience. How could I? I feared they would think I was crazy or that it was a side effect of the anesthesia. But each night, when I closed my eyes, I returned to that place. I saw the light, felt that unconditional love, and remembered the hooded figures. Especially the last one, the one who had spoken to me without words. A week after the surgery, I was discharged. Coming home felt strange. Everything seemed the same, but I had changed profoundly. My daughter greeted me with a tight hug, and I felt a surge of gratitude for having returned. That night, after putting my little one to bed, I sat on the couch, lost in my thoughts. That's when it happened. The room seemed to change. The walls faded, and I found myself once again in that space of pure light. In front of me was the hooded figure. "Am I dreaming?" I asked, though I knew this was more real than any dream. The figure tilted its head, and again, I felt rather than heard its response. "You are between worlds, Diane. Not fully here, nor fully there. Why did you bring me back?" I asked, feeling a mix of curiosity and frustration. I had never felt so at peace, so loved. The figure moved closer, and although I couldn't see its face, I felt a deep compassion emanating from it. "Your journey isn't over, Diane. You have a purpose to fulfill." "What purpose?" I asked, desperate to understand. "To share the love you experienced," the figure responded. "To show others there is more than what they can see or touch." I felt tears running down my cheeks. But how? I'm not anyone special. I'm just me. The figure extended its hand, and though it didn't physically touch me, I felt an enveloping warmth. "You are more than you think, Diane. You have seen beyond the veil. You have experienced unconditional love. That has changed you, and through you, others can change too." "I'm afraid," I admitted. "What if no one believes me? What if they think I'm crazy?" "Fear is part of the journey," the figure replied. "But remember the love you felt. That love is stronger than any fear." I wanted to ask more questions to understand more, but I felt the connection fading. The figure and the light began to drift away. "Wait," I shouted. "I have so many questions." The figure's voice echoed one last time in my mind before disappearing completely. "The answers are within you, Diane. Trust in what you've experienced. Trust in love." And so, as quickly as it had begun, the encounter ended. I found myself back on my sofa in my living room, but I felt transformed. That night marked the beginning of my true journey. A journey to understand what I had experienced and how I could share it with the world. It wouldn't be easy. There would be doubts, fears, and obstacles. But I also knew I had something invaluable, the certainty that there's more to this universe than we can see or touch, and at the heart of everything lies an unconditional love that encompasses all. From that moment on, my life took a completely new direction. I was no longer just Diane, the former model, the divorced mother. I was someone who had seen beyond, someone with a message to share. The path would be long and sometimes difficult, but whenever I doubted, I would close my eyes and remember the light, the love, and the wordless voice that had told me to trust. The days following my near-death experience were a whirlwind of emotions and sensations. At first, I felt as if I was walking on a cloud, disconnected from the reality around me. The world seemed the same, but I had changed profoundly. I didn't tell anyone about my experience immediately. How could I explain something I didn't fully understand myself? Besides, I feared people would think I was crazy or blame it on the side effects of the anesthesia. So I kept quiet, trying to process everything I had lived through. It was a few weeks later, when I finally felt strong enough to go out, that everything changed again. My sister invited me to dinner at a local restaurant, insisting that I needed to get out and return to normal. I agreed, thinking maybe she was right. That night, I got ready carefully, feeling strangely nervous. When we arrived at the restaurant, the maitre d' led us to our table. And that's when it happened. The moment I stepped into the dining room, it was as if someone had turned up the world's volume to an unbearable level. Suddenly, I could feel everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. The anxiety of the waiter who had just broken a plate in the kitchen. The sadness of the woman at the corner table whose husband was leaving her. The contained excitement of the young man about to propose to his girlfriend. The knee pain of the elderly man sitting by the window. All these emotions, sensations, and thoughts hit me like a giant wave, threatening to drown me. I staggered, clutching my sister's arm. "Diane? Are you okay?" she asked, her voice full of concern. I couldn't answer. Tears began streaming down my face as I struggled to breathe. It was too much. Too much information. Too many emotions. Too much of everything. "I need to get out of here," I managed to whisper. My sister, confused but understanding, helped me out of the restaurant. Once outside, the cool night air helped me calm down a bit. But the sensations didn't completely fade. It was as if I could suddenly tune into the emotional frequencies of everyone around me. What is happening to me? I thought, terrified. Am I going crazy? The following days were hell. Every time I left the house, I was overwhelmed by the emotions and sensations of others. It was as if my near-death experience had opened some sort of channel that I couldn't close. I tried explaining it to my sister, but I saw the disbelief in her eyes. "Maybe you should see a psychiatrist," she gently suggested. "The trauma from the surgery might be affecting you more than you think." But I knew this was different. It wasn't trauma. It was a gift, or a curse, depending on how I looked at it. I spent weeks isolated in my house, trying to understand and control these new abilities. I read everything I could about near-death experiences, empathy, and sensitivity. But nothing seemed to fully explain what was happening to me. One sleepless night, while flipping through a book on meditation, I had an epiphany. Maybe instead of fighting these sensations, I needed to learn to flow with them. I started practicing meditation daily. At first, it was difficult. My mind was constantly bombarded by thoughts and emotions, both mine and others. But little by little, I began to find calm in the midst of the chaos. I learned to visualize a protective bubble around myself, allowing me to filter external energies. It didn't block them entirely, but softened them just enough for me to handle. Over time, what I once saw as a curse began to transform into a gift. I could sense when someone was suffering, even if they tried to hide it. I could offer comfort and understanding in a way I had never been able to before. My relationship with my daughter deepened. I could feel her fears and joys as if they were my own, which allowed me to be a better, more understanding and patient mother. But it wasn't easy. There were days when the intensity of the emotions overwhelmed me. Days when I wished I could turn off this gift and go back to being the old Diane. But every time I felt that way, I remembered the light, the unconditional love I had experienced during my near-death experience. And that gave me the strength to keep going. Gradually, I began to accept that this was my new reality. I was no longer just Diane. the former model, the divorced mother. I was Diane, the empath, the healer, the one who could see beyond the masks people wore. And with that acceptance came a new purpose. I knew I had to use this gift to help others. I didn't know exactly how, but I was determined to find a way. Each day was a new challenge, but also a new opportunity. An opportunity to grow, to learn, to help. And though the path sometimes felt overwhelming, I knew I was not alone. I had the guidance of that hooded figure, the memory of unconditional love, and the certainty that all of this was part of a greater plan. My journey was just beginning, and I was ready to face whatever came my way with all my new abilities and sensitivities. Because now I understood that these were not a burden but a gift. As the months passed, my new empathetic abilities became more grounded. I no longer felt overwhelmed by the emotions of others. Instead, I had learned to navigate that sea of feelings with a skill that still surprised me. It was as if I had discovered a new sense, one that allowed me to see the world in a completely different way. One day, while walking in the park with my daughter, I felt a wave of sadness so intense that it made me stop in my tracks. My little one looked at me with concern, but I smiled to reassure her. "Wait here for a moment, sweetheart," I said, pointing to a nearby bench. Following the trail of that emotion, I found myself in front of a young woman sitting alone on a bench, staring off into the distance. Without a second thought, I sat down next to her. "Hi," I said softly. "I know you don't know me, but are you okay?" The young woman looked at me in surprise, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I don't know," she replied in a shaky voice. In that moment, I felt as if an invisible connection had been established between us. I could feel her pain, her confusion, her fear of the future. Without saying another word, I took her hand in mine. I don't know how long we sat there in silence, but little by little, I felt the emotional storm within her beginning to calm. When she finally spoke, she told me about her recent cancer diagnosis, her fears, her doubts. I had no magical answers for her, but I could offer her something she desperately needed: understanding and unconditional support. I told her about my own near-death experience, about the light and love I had felt. And although I couldn't promise her that everything would be okay, I was able to show her that she was not alone in her struggle. When we said goodbye, the young woman hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know how, but you've made me feel less lost." That encounter was a turning point for me. I realized that my gift wasn't just for me. It was a tool to help others. From that day on, I began to actively seek ways to use my abilities for the benefit of others. I started volunteering at a local hospice. There, I could use my empathy to connect with terminal patients, offering them comfort and understanding in their final moments. I could feel their fears, their regrets, their unfulfilled hopes. And though it was sometimes emotionally exhausting, I knew I was making a difference. Over time, my reputation began to grow. People started seeking me out, not just for comfort, but also for guidance. I began giving talks about my near-death experience and how it had changed my perspective on life. At first, I feared public scrutiny. What would my former colleagues from the fashion world think? Would they label me as crazy? But to my surprise, I found more acceptance than I expected. Many people were hungry for hope, for a deeper connection with something beyond the material. However, it wasn't all easy. There were skeptics, of course. People who accused me of being a fraud, of taking advantage of others' vulnerability. Their criticism hurt, but I stayed true to my purpose. I knew what I had experienced, and I knew my gift was real. My daughter, who is now a teenager, was my greatest support. Although it was initially difficult for her to understand my new abilities, over time, she became my confidant and anchor. "Mom," she said one day, "I'm proud of you. You're helping a lot of people." As my influence grew, I began receiving invitations to speak at conferences and appear on television shows. Every time I shared my story, I felt I was fulfilling the purpose entrusted to me. I was sharing the unconditional love I had experienced, showing others that there was more to life than what they could see or touch. But it wasn't all public speaking or giving advice. Sometimes, my gift led me into unexpected situations. Like that time in the middle of a crowded shopping mall, I felt a wave of despair so strong it took my breath away. Following that feeling, I found myself in front of a man who was about to commit a terrible act. With care and compassion, I managed to connect with him, offering him an alternative to his despair. With every person I helped, with every life I touched, I felt I was closer to understanding the true purpose of my near-death experience. It wasn't just about me. It was about building bridges, showing others that we are all connected by that unconditional love I had experienced. As the years passed, my understanding of the world and my place in it continued to evolve. I no longer saw myself as Diane, the former model, or even as Diane, the empath. I saw myself simply as a channel, an instrument through which love and understanding could flow to those who needed it. And although the journey was sometimes difficult, though there were days when the weight of the world's emotions felt almost unbearable, I never lost sight of that moment of light and love I had experienced. It was my beacon, my guide, my constant reminder that there is something greater than all of us, something that connects us all. Looking back, I realized that my life has taken a path I could never have imagined. But I wouldn't change it for anything. Because now I know that every experience, every challenge, every moment of joy and pain has brought me exactly where I need to be. And as long as I feel that unconditional love in my heart, I know I am on the right path. My journey continues, and with each passing day, I am more grateful for the gift I have been given. A gift that allows me to see beyond appearances, to touch lives in deep and meaningful ways, and to remind others that we are all part of something greater, something beautiful and full of love. And so, with gratitude in my heart and purpose in my steps, I move forward, ready to face any challenge the future may bring, knowing that every experience is an opportunity to grow, to love, and to share that love with the world.